about the second most important hook, and that is the effect hook that comes with React. Now, the effect hook adds the ability to perform side effects from a function component. It serves the same purpose as component did mount, component did update, component will mount in React classes. Again, remember, the whole idea of hooks is to be able to do the things that we were able to do inside of a class, but this time inside of a function. And we see here that we can use effect like a function and just tell it what we need to do. So let's give it a go. I want to use effect now to replace this component did mount, because right now our robots aren't being fetched. Our friends are non-existent because we're not fetching. So let's do this. Let's do use effect. We have that because, remember, we've imported it over here. And use effect is going to run like this. And inside of use effect, we have to tell it what is the side effect that we want this function to do. So I'm going to just create an arrow function. And inside of here, we want to just create, we want this function to do. So I'm going to just create an arrow function. And inside of here, we're going to put this fetch call that we had in component did mount. So let me just comment that out. Make sure our spacing is correct. And inside of here, we now have use effect. And this use effect gets run every time the function app gets run automatically. So we see over here that we're calling use effect because of the brackets. And inside of here, we're telling it, hey, what's the side effect? So this is something important to remember. By default, React runs this use effect function after every time it renders. So when app renders, it's going to run the use effect and whatever's inside of it. Now remember, we no longer have this .set state. Instead, we have, what are we changing? We're changing the robots. So I can say set robots right over here. And this set robots is going to get the new users. Like that. Now, let me save this and see if this works. I'm going to save. All right, compiled successfully, no errors, but do we get our robot friends? Let's have a look. Hey, look at that. We have our robot friends. Love it. Can I search through them? What? Look at that. So simple, and it works just as expected. But let's take a look at the console. If I open up the console, I don't know if you can tell here, but look how many times this render function is running. It just keeps going. It's actually running in an infinite loop right now. Let's take a look and find out why that is. And this is another tricky part when people get started with hooks. Again, it's often commented in the documentation, which you can read on the React website. Now, this use effect actually has a second parameter that it receives. Remember, the first parameter is the function, what it should do when app renders. And the second one is this. If present, which is an optional argument, if present, effect will only activate if the value in the list changes. What does that mean? Well, use effect receives an array as a second argument. Now, before I just show you what this does, let's have a look at why exactly the use effect was running continuously over and over and over. Well, if we look at the code, when the app renders, it creates the state, right? That's the initial state. And then it runs the use effect because it rendered. So it fetches the users, and then these users are going to update the state. It's going to update the robot state with the new users. So what happens? Well, new users are being rendered right here. So the app re-renders and says, hey, I got new robots. So I need to re-render myself to show the robots. So it re-renders. But remember what I said with use hooks. Every time the component re-renders, it's going to run use effect. So it's going to run fetch again, and then it's going to set robots again. So it has to re-render. And then it goes use effect again, then set robots. So it goes into a continuous loop. And the trick with use effect is that if you don't want this to constantly re-render, then you wouldn't want to set state inside of use effect. But if we are setting state like we have here, we can give it an optional list. And this optional list tells us in here, hey, when should I run use effect? So you can tell React to skip applying the effect or the use effect function if certain values haven't changed between re-renders. So in here, we say, hey, only run use effect if one of these have changed. So for example, if I put in robots here and I save, what will happen if I go back? Oh, you see that it's still running. Look at that. It's still running, still running, still running. Why is that? Well, because robots changes, right? We always run set robots. So that means, hey, run use effect because robots changed. Hey, run use effect because robots changed. That's exactly what we were doing before without the second argument. But in here, if we do, let's say, search field, only run use effect if search field changes. If I save this and go back, there you go. It no longer goes into that infinite loop. But if the search field changes, you'll see that we're fetching again. So that's not good either. Instead, we want to give it an empty list or an empty array. Because what does that mean? It means, hey, only run use effect when this changes. But when the list or the array is empty, it's a shortcut for doing component did mount. Hey, just run use effect initially when the component mounts, when app is rendered. So the component did mount shortcut is essentially this, adding an array. I know it's tricky, maybe it doesn't make sense. It's just a quirk, a thing that you just have to remember with React. Remember, hooks aren't a JavaScript thing. It's just a way to use React that you need to get used to, just like you had to get used to this.setState. So by having an empty array here, I now replicated component did mount. So now if we just move console.log over here to use effect, so inside of use effect, we'll ignore the warnings for now. If I go back, you'll see that it's an empty array. But as soon as I type something, no other updates are made because use effect is only run once. Versus before when we didn't have anything, and you see that it was going like crazy. So this is a shortcut. Remember, component did mount, we just add the empty array. And then we can give it different options inside of this array. Now, if you're using Create React App, this actually gives you a hint here whenever you're using it incorrectly. So React hooks, use effect has missing dependencies, robots, and search field. Either include them or remove dependency array. And what this is saying is, hey, inside of use effect, you have two pieces of state, robots and search field that you're using. Now, in our case, we're just console logging, but it gives you a warning saying, hey, don't you want these to run if you're using them inside of use effect and add them to the dependencies? So it's saying this, hey, just add these. And you see that it's compiled successfully. But again, we don't want to do that because remember, robots change all the time. So if we do that, it turns into an infinite loop. So let's remove and remove. There we go. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.